So here is actually what closed versus open means. Everybody thinks of it as a light switch, which it's not. It's more like a dimmer switch. When it's off, it's off. And what that means with closed is that we as adoptees that have been through closed adoption, our records, when I talk about records, I mean names, basically birth mom's name, sometimes birth father's name, but are legally sealed by the courts. This is very, very problematic and quite damaging to an adoptee.
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in La La Land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Welcome to today's episode of the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, where we uncover the layers of a story that challenges and changes the way we think about adoption. Imagine it's 1979 and a couple receives the life-changing call. A baby girl was just born, and you've been chosen as her parents. This baby girl is Allison Olson, and her journey from that fateful day to now has been nothing short of extraordinary. Raised alongside an older adopted sibling and married to an adoptee himself, Allison's life is a testament to the woven complexities and beautiful tapestry that adoption can bring to a family. Now living in Oregon with two daughters, one biological and one adopted, as well as her two cats, Bo and Arrow, Allison is on a mission. Her goal? To transform the adoption narrative from viewing children as lucky to recognizing them as deeply loved. After finding gaps in children's books on adoption, Allison took pen to paper to author her own stories aimed at building confidence and self-esteem in young adoptees. Today, we dive deep into Allison's motivations for writing, her insights on adoption, and her vision for a new narrative. Get ready to be inspired by a conversation that might just reshape how you view family, love, and belonging. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, Allison. Let's jump right in. And I want to jump right in with community. I know that community drives so much of what I do in my adoption work. So I'm curious what drove your desire to connect with other people in the adoption community, when that was, and what it looked like.
Yes. Well, Rebecca, thank you for having me on. It is great to get to chat with you. Yes. So being an adoptee, born in 1979, as you mentioned, from a closed adoption, and then going through our adoption process with our youngest daughter, who is like me in the fact that she was a domestic infant adoption through an agency. The major difference is that her adoption is open. So what made me get involved with the community is we were preparing for her birth and adoption, and I was in the nursery, and we had the nursery already, and I had bought all of the latest highly recommended books, right, for children on adoption. And I have a different lens being an adoptee, and I started reading them, and I was kind of baffled. So the books, so there were two books that existed, or I should say there were two books we owned in 1979 and in the 80s. And those books were very factual. And so something happened between then and these books that I was reading. And I was just really shocked. There were several that had a lucky narrative. There's one, and I won't go into the author or the specific title, but if people know these books well, they know what I'm talking about. And it was a little cringeworthy. It had on a particular spread, on one side, it would say, you needed a home. The other side would have the adoptive parents. We were there to give you a home. You flip the page. You had tears. We were there to dry your tears. It just gives you the icks, right? Like, we were not there to save this child. Like that.
The story.
Yeah. Oh, you know? Yeah. And so that one, like, really, I was like, oh gosh. And I'm like, okay, next book, right? So I'm sitting there wanting to have this special moment in the rocking chair, in the nursery. So I've got this big pile. I'm like throwing them down for all these different reasons. I got to the end and I pulled my husband aside and I said, I think I need to write a book. And I think I need to help out. I think I need to step back into this community and be a voice for the adoptees and to help other adoptive parents so that they can feel like they're quote unquote doing it right, like doing it okay, you know, because everybody wants to, but we don't always have the right resources. So that is where I felt the pull and the connection to come and help out.
I love that you took it upon yourself. I remember when my son is now 12, and I remember reading him books, and there were books that I would read, and I was like, I don't like these, but I didn't exactly know why, and I just thought, okay, well, that's what we have, and people say to read these, and so, you know, I didn't read them a lot because I didn't love them. I love the fact that you knew enough to challenge that and to do something about it. So you didn't feel a need before you adopted your child to immerse yourself in community? That's interesting.
That's correct, because I was just living my life. I guess I assumed things had moved forward. Right. So if when I was raised, it was, you know, very factual and like these clinical books. And what I have noticed is within the adoption community, we have progressed significantly. So 90% of adoptions now are open. It's about 90%. In fact, it's quite difficult to find a closed adoption because they have done so many studies, right, on the health and wellness of an adoptee, and openness is very important in that. And so, you know, going through the adoption agency and them explaining to us how adoption was, I was like, whoa, this is great. This is great. So like I said, I was just shocked when I saw the books because I thought so much had progressed. And so yeah, I think that before I was naive, maybe would be the best way. I was just thinking, you know, I had a good childhood, and I was just thinking that things had progressed and that, you know, it must be much better. And then especially going through the adoption process and all the training that we got and all, you know, like all of the attachment stuff that we learned. And like I said, like hours and hours of training of both of us together. Even our oldest daughter had to go through training. All of that, I just felt like, oh, this is set up well, and all this, until I got to the children's books.
And you knew you wanted openness.
I did not know it necessarily existed to that level. And I want openness all the time. All the time. If I could live down the street from the birth family, I would. You know, they did intentionally pick us because we were out of state. But we go and visit, and we text all the time, and we send pictures, and we call, and we have video chats. But yeah, if it was up to me, I would live down the street.
Yeah. I love that. We have an amazing open relationship too. And it really is so beautiful. And anyways, that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm wondering if you can recall a moment that really impacted your perspective on the importance of changing the narrative.
Yes. So it definitely would be reading those books. And so the one thing, I know I focused on the lucky narrative. The other thing that was probably more prevalent, so that one upset me the most, but the other one that was more prevalent, and I could tell, being an adoptee, by the way, if I pick up a book and I read it, if an adoptive parent wrote it, versus an adoptee versus a birth mom versus someone completely not connected to adoption. I could tell when I would read these books. And a lot of them are written by adoptive parents, which makes sense. They want to read the story that they want their kids to hear, so they're writing that story. But the interesting part with those books that really had the impact on me was that, to me, they were unbalanced. So there's also a famous book, I'm not going to say the author or anything, but that most people love. But I disagree with it. It is, I'm not going to say what it's called, but there is this, it's a bear. It's a bear mom reading to her bear child in a rocking chair. And there is this want. I won't say the real word. There's this want. And this want grew and it grew and it grew for this child. And so like I started reading it from the perspective of an adoptive parent, again, sitting in that rocking chair in this empty nursery. And I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. Then I get to the page that starts talking about the birth mom, and it was struggle. And I closed that book, and I actually have never in my life felt more abandoned than after I read that book. And so it was that important to me. If I'm an adult that was raised in a very healthy household, that did a lot of adoption things right, and I could read this, but what is this sending to children? And so the unbalanced part is, when we all come to adoption, we come with struggle and we come with love from all the angles, right? And so to me, it felt very unbalanced that they would talk about all of the love from the adoptive parents, none of the struggle, none of the infertility struggles or whatever other struggles brought them there. And then the birth mom, all they talk about is her struggle and not her love. And so that's why I wrote Surrounded by Love, so that it was equal. So that we focused on the love the adoptive parents had before this child was born and the love the birth mom had before the child was born. So balancing out the story, that was what was most impactful for me.
Let's talk about your books. One is Surrounded by Love, and the other, Learning About My Friend's Adoption.
Yes.
Which came first? And I know that you were aiming to fill those gaps that you were talking about. And I'd love to just hear about how you did that and what you've seen from that.
Sure. So Surrounded by Love was the first one, because I intentionally wrote that for young adoptees. And it was really important for me to kind of hustle and get it out there so that I could start reading it to my daughter, right? Nice. And as well as making an impact, as soon as possible on the adoption community. So that was my first book, and that is the one that I was talking about with the balance, right? So I'll pull it out.
Yeah, and if you want to read a part of it, feel free.
Sure. It's won several awards. The biggest one, the most prestigious one. So I've got the Mom's Choice Award, but also the Benjamin Franklin Award. It's won. So it's very exciting. And some of the biggest things are that the birth mom is illustrated. She is very present in this book. Half of the book is the adoptive parents. Half of the book is the birth mom. And I made sure she was shown as many times as they show the adoptive family. So there's things in there that I really thought about and took, just did very thoughtfully. And also when I was looking for my illustrator, her name is Darlie Urbistando, and she goes by Happy Lee. And so that's also a reflection of how she illustrates as well. Her brother is adopted. And that was important to me because there are so many sensitivities and complexities in adoption. And so when we would talk about the pages and what I wanted to show, I would talk about the emotion I wanted reflected in the character. And when she's able to fill the birth mom's eyes with tears, but yet show happiness on the face when seeing her daughter walk for the first time with her adoptive parents. It's like you can feel the emotion through it. And so that is that. And so some of the key things that I did in here, I'll just show you real quick.
And I'm curious just for a second,
sure,
if you would, why was it so important to you to have the birth mom shown so much through the book?
Absolutely. To reflect the importance of all of these individuals on the adoptee's life, as well as I felt like she's such an important part of the story. And when I'm talking about Surrounded by Love, it's, that there's phrases, like, let me show you in here, that are never said in adoption books. it says it's her pregnant with the baby and hurts all over. She's so happy and she's lovingly holding her baby bump, looking down at her baby. And it says, she loved you even when you were tiny in her belly. And that is a big deal to an adoptee.
What a beautiful narrative to start with.
One of the biggest things that I did, because again, my importance, thank you. Yeah, my importance of the balancing out of that it's surrounded by love and not that one side loved and one side struggled, is the decision of adoption. So I have a night scene with the adoptive parents and they're looking up at the stars, and because they're thinking about a baby, the stars are in the shape of a baby. And it says here, they wished on shooting stars, they meditated, and they prayed. So this is them making the decision of adoption. Then I wanted to equalize it. I did not want it to be birth mom struggled, birth mom anything. I use the same type of a scene. It's a different night sky. She's pregnant again, lovingly looking up at the sky, lovingly holding her baby bump, looking up. She equally sees a baby in the stars. And it says, she wished on shooting stars, she meditated, and she prayed. Intentionally to equalize that very big decision on both sides and to make it very child friendly. So those are some of the biggest things. And then also for the adoptee to know how wanted and truly loved they are. Here's one where she just has this huge stack of papers. Birth mom has a huge stack of papers. And it's basically that there were many hopeful adoptive parents that wanted to be chosen to raise and love you. And so it's just a very happy story that fills a child with love when they're done reading it.
With all those little nuances that, I love how thoughtful you were.
Thank you. Well, I will tell you, there is one Easter egg, and I like to save it for podcasts, right? So I don't write about it on social media. It's not on my website. I only share it in podcasts. The little Easter egg is something that my illustrator did, and she's amazing with that. She does Easter eggs in all my books. Okay. Notice all of the main characters have a main color, right? Yeah. So the birth mom is in pink. The adoptive mom is in yellow. The adoptive dad is in blue. The adoptee wears a color from all of them to show how important they all are in shaping this child.
So beautiful. I just love the intention.
Oh, thank you.
All right, let's talk about the intention of your other book.
Yes, learning about my friend's adoption. So I am sure that you have encountered this. People outside of the adoption community and where their education level is around adoption. So, as I said, I do believe that within the adoption community, and some people say like adoption triad, some people say adoption constellation, because there's, birth siblings, birth cousins, aunts and uncles, and they're all important. Yep. However you say it, within our bubble, within our community, we have made strides. And the fact that, people are listening to this podcast, they're wanting to continue to learn, like these are all amazing things. Yeah. But outside of our bubble, and then if you keep going further and further outside of our bubble, right, people that are not touched within their immediate family by adoption, I would go so far as to say the education level outside of our community, the stuff that people say to me, you guys would not believe.
Wait, give me one.
Oh, I can give you a whole bunch. Like there's the most common one. Well, who's your real family? Where are your real parents? If there's ever anything said, even in the slightest bit negative about adoption, well, would you have rather been aborted? Like, whoa, do you feel that's appropriate to say to me as another adult? So there are those things. There are also the ones that actually are more hurtful. Like if somebody's attacking you, it's easier to fight. It's the ones that are more hurtful. They are well-meaning people. So I remember there was someone actually holding my daughter. So this is like someone not in our immediate family, but close enough I would allow them to hold the daughter, right? So family of family at a family barbecue. They were holding her and it was an older person. She was having a conversation with another older person. And they were joking about how they used to tease a sibling for being adopted because they looked a little different in their family. And I swooped in.
I just read a post like that 2 days ago.
Yeah. I mean, it is still happening. It is so offensive. It is ridiculous. I just swooped in and just grabbed her. I'm like, you're not allowed to be holding my baby and having this type of a conversation. Well, she may not know the English language yet. I just feel like this is bad vibes happening around her. And so I took her out. So those are some examples. But I think the biggest thing is I was sitting with it and I was perplexed. How do it's like too much to take on. How do I educate this huge amount of people, in the United States and abroad, that are outside of this adoption community? And I thought, you do it through children. And then the other piece, so there were no books. I shouldn't say there were no books. There were no books I could easily find. That's the best way to say it, on the market that taught non-adopted children. Just to be clear, they don't even know they're called that. So let's say children that are not adopted, right? To teach them about adoption. So this is one of the first of its kind, and is very intentionally to teach the other children about what it means to have an open adoption specifically. And so in this book, this little boy finds out that his good friend is adopted, and he's so excited. He's at the dinner table, as we are when we share really exciting things we've learned during the day. And he's like, oh my gosh, you guys, like, I can't, I just learned something new today about my friend. I'm like, she's just like you and me. She likes to dress up, build rocket ships, dance, but she's adopted. And here's what she told me about that. And then it goes through their day at school and his questions to her and her answers. Wow. And where does this come from? The questions I got growing up and the questions, that I know that she will get. So like the nuanced difference of an open adoption versus my closed adoption.
Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. The Adoption Roadmap podcast is sponsored by the Adoption Roadmap Academy, the only online program of its kind for hopeful adoptive parents like you who want step-by-step guidance, preparing for your home study, creating a compelling adoption profile book, choosing the right agencies, and more so that you can bring your baby home sooner. As an adoption consultant and adoptive mom who's been where you are, I'm going to guide you step-by-step through everything you need to know about the domestic infant adoption journey from home study to finalization. And the great part is you get to do it at your own pace with a supportive community behind you. The Adoption Roadmap Academy is a step-by-step guide to domestic infant adoption for hopeful individuals and families who are sick and tired of waiting forever. It's the first and only self-paced adoption consultant-led program that shows you exactly how to navigate the domestic adoption process from home study to finalization. With our proven 4-step adoption roadmap model, you're going to be able to save time you can't make up, hours and weeks and even months of tedious legwork and research are done for you. You're going to be able to go at your own pace. No matter what else is going on in life, nobody's going to be breathing down your throat. You are going to be able to gain and keep momentum because everything is going to be spoon-fed for you in exactly the way you need. You are going to possibly even save money by knowing how to vet situations and working with the right agencies. It could save you a lot of heartache. You are going to be able to access this course anytime, anywhere, and get expert guidance and support, not only by me, but also by an amazing community who know exactly what you are walking through. Here's what you can expect inside. You'll be getting streaming videos, worksheets, bonus resources, an adoption profile creation, agency contacts, live streams to connect with other people, and unending education, all using our 4-step proprietary adoption roadmap model. Plus, you'll be receiving a bonus mindset step that I highly recommend for everyone. So if you're interested in starting your adoption journey and ready to fast forward and simplify your domestic adoption process, please email the word academy to support@rgadoptionconsulting.com today, and we'll get you started.
And what this does too, that I don't think adoptive parents fully realize, is that right now, and we don't want to think about it because it kind of like hurts us, right? We want to protect our kids so much. The burden of educating their friends, 100% on them. You are not on the recess playground. You are not with them, even in daycare. Like, it is on them. I have always had to educate my friends. I even sometimes have to like do an eye roll and take a deep breath. Like, okay, I'm 44, almost 45. Let me educate this new friend about my adoption and my daughter's adoption. How wonderful to just buy a book and just hand them out. Have a few copies sitting around. Just hand them out. You know, your friend gets a new friend. There's a new neighbor that comes in. Hand them out.
Family members.
Cousins for sure.
Yeah.
Just let's get them educated. Get these in the schools so that everyone understands. And there's some things I did intentionally to normalize having a birth family and being involved with a birth family. So like he's bewildered, right, with his face, like, what? He's like, so you have two moms? And she's like, yes, but more than that, I have two families. And then and it says like I have grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins in both families. I stay in touch with them just like you do with your family. So again, I try to normalize this. And my favorite one is this, because we get this a lot as adoptees. He's scratching his head bewildered. Do you love both of your families? Her reaction as a typical child, she giggles. She giggles. Yes, of course I love them both. Just like you love your family. And so
beautiful.
That is the importance of this book and why I wanted to write it and have it on the market.
I love that. And when you were writing it, did floods of questions that you used?
Floods. I had to cut them back. And so I didn't go for the hard-hitting ones of real family, because also different adoptees consider different things real. So I just, I didn't want to go with positive adoption language. I just wanted what would educate a child enough to be like, okay, I have a good enough understanding of adoption that now I can go play trucks or go do something else. So that was the hope from it.
All right, great. And go on.
Great. Now move on. That's when you know you've done your job. Yeah.
And then they'll come back and ask their mom a question 3 days later.
Exactly. Well, and I did a panel to review this with a panel. I do different things on my social media so that I can make sure this is appropriate, right, for the community. So I did a panel, and one gal came that was a neighbor of someone who's about to adopt. And she was like, oh yeah, I was preparing my kids. And then it was like the very first question they had, I thought, oh, I have no idea the answer. So she's like, I need this book so that I know what I can say at least, And then if there's open questions, you can always go to that family and see how they want to say things. But it's certainly a start and a good foundation.
That's so wonderful. Well, that's not where your intentions stopped, because you're an overachiever. So you then went on to write this love letters to my child, for my child, right? Is that what it's called? Love letters for my child.
Yep. Love letters to my child.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna say anything else about it. Why don't you just tell us what that is?
Sure. So what I, would hear and experience the most in talking with folks that were going through the adoption process is the wait is so very tough, right? And the wait was even difficult for my husband and I and our oldest daughter, right?
The weight to be matched.
The weight to be matched. So once you're between active and matched, where you're just waiting for a birth mom to pick your family, that is the toughest. And and I wished I had started it earlier. We started it when we got the phone call that she was in labor. So I was like frantically journaling like how we were feeling. Like we're trying like mad to pack, and Seth is picking out the flights and all of that. that. We're heading to the airport. And then I'm at the airport and I write again. And it was healing to me. But what I don't think adoptive parents understand is, as adoptees, we grow up, and one of the bigger things that is the challenge is, were we loved, were we wanted? And a lot of society makes us think we weren't, because of those things I was saying, the 19th, poor education outside of the adoption community, when truly children that are placed for adoption are, I would go as far as to say, more loved, or loved by more people, at least, because there was so much thought and care that went into it, right? On both sides. To go through a home study is quite difficult. That is commitment, that is love. To make that huge decision as a birth mom and and even a birth father, if he's involved, like, that is huge. So there is a lot of love there. And then the adoptee doesn't see that. So they do now through, like, my book, Surrounded by Love, but how they could see it from us as adoptive parents is letters to them. So what I was writing was to her. We were so excited to get this phone call, and we're scurrying through the house because we cannot wait to meet you. And I even think, if, as you're going through the process and as it's tough, if it gets really, really long, you go through multiple disruptions, these letters say, we thought that was you. It did not work out. And the birth mom's going to parent. So that's not you. We are sad, but we are ready for you. And you have to imagine, as an adult adoptee, reading that from your childhood, you were loved. Like, there is no room for question in that. Yeah. So that's why I felt like that was important to get out there, so that other waiting, hopeful adoptive parents that are in between the active and being selected phase, they can do that. And again, it benefits them and their future child to write that. And you can write the frustration. I am mad. It's been 2 years. All I want is to have you in my arms. I want you to be in your nursery. It saddens me to walk by your nursery. Again, put yourself in that child's place. Fast forward to they're 30 years old. They're probably going to be crying reading that, knowing how loved they were and how much strain that was putting on their parents just waiting. So that's, again, why I did it. Everything I'm doing is to benefit the adoptee, and what really in the end is to benefit the adoptee. It benefits the adoptive parents as well, but it's to make sure that adoptee feels the love and the warmth and everything that is happening and are the feelings everybody has. But I think we don't think about that actually might be helpful to them in the future.
For sure. I think journaling is so powerful, or just the act of writing. I journaled. The other day I pulled out, I had 20 something journals from my life, and I journaled all the way through my infertility journey. And then I stopped when I started with adoption. I could die. Like, what made me stop? Maybe I finally felt like, okay, I can breathe. This is it. Or I just got tired of writing.
The weight's off the shoulders. Mm-hmm.
Right. I stopped writing, and I wish I would. And so now when we get new families that start the process, we send them an adoption specific journal with prompts. And
I love that.
So it's nice. It's great to know that you have one too now that we can look at. But I think it's so important, not only for your future child, but for yourself as well. What a healing way to, first of all, manifest what you're looking for, and to be able to put out there what your dreams are. I'm a huge believer in that. And I love how you put meditation and prayer in your books, because I believe in all of that. Any way we can put it out there. All right, let's talk about open and semi-open and closed. And what does that look like to you? What does that mean to you when I say those words?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked that question. So I actually think the phrase semi-open is totally made up. So here is actually what closed versus open means. Everybody thinks of it as a light switch, which it's not. It's more like a dimmer switch. When it's off, it's off. And what that means with closed is that we as adoptees that have been through closed adoption, our records When I talk about records, I mean names, basically birth mom's name, sometimes birth father's name, but are legally sealed by the courts. This is very, very problematic and quite damaging to an adoptee. Everyone has the right to know their lineage, their heritage, and a name of a biological relative. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So I am 44 years old. I am a taxpayer. I'm a good citizen. There are people that my taxes are paying money to cover their entire jobs to prevent me from getting this information. So when I say I'm an open adoption advocate, I am very seriously an open adoption advocate. And if you are an adoptive parent, you should be getting involved with these different organizations that fight for adoptees' rights. In very specific states, of course, not even the majority of them, just a few states, we can get some information now if we were born and adopted in those states. But in most cases,
of a certain age, I think too, right? Don't you
no, when they release them, they tend to release them. No, so that's actually a big misnomer. People used to think as soon as children turned 18, they could get their records. That's why it's important for me to clarify. I'm 44 years old. And in my search, which I won't talk much about, but in my search when I was 29, 30, there was a social worker that sat there that had my full case file and could not and would not read me the name. And so all of our tax dollars paid all this money for them to do all this stuff to try to search this person out to get an approval, disapproval. That is not the right of a birth family. That is the right of an adoptee. Everyone has that right to know their family and to know medical history. So the difference, that is closed.
Didn't
then
you
when
just
it gets,
want to grab that paper out of her hands?
I do now. At the time I was like, okay, well, what's the next step? And what's the next step? Because there's so much red tape, right?
Give it to me. You have you're reading it.
Now that's how I feel. And there is some anger towards that. And that's why I think it's important that adoptive parents, even if your child is through an open adoption, showing them how much you love them by supporting older adoptees. And everyone wants to know their heritage. You know, if you think about it, it's like everybody wants to know, like you find out that you have this tiny sliver of whatever Irish, like, oh, I always was interested in Irish dancing. Maybe I'll go try to learn some of that. Like whatever it is, everyone is interested in that. So for an adoptee, it's no exception, right? And supporting that interest and need in your child is very important as an adoptive parent. But so I focused on closed. So then when it comes to open it, like I said, it's like a dimmer switch or like a sliding scale, right? So closed is totally closed. Legally, the courts have sealed everything.
So you're not even talking about a relationship.
I'm not talking about a relationship, but that's because that's a good clarification, Rebecca, because I will be on forums and I will be in a question and answer session and I will get adoptive parents that will say, well, we used to have an open, but it moved to a closed. That is incorrect. If you know it's closed because it's legally sealed, you as adoptive parents do not know the name of the birth family. Your child does not. It goes through extensive red tape to get that information legally, right? So if you do not have that, you do not have a closed adoption. So then once it's open, which just means you get the name, first and last name of the birth mom. So every adoption through foster care, with the exception of if there was something that happened really extreme and they want to close down names for safety or something. But usually if children are old enough, they know the names of their parents. So most of those are open as well. So it literally is about knowing names and legally if you have access to that name or not. Then it's that whole dimmer switch to like the relationship. And then a relationship can ebb and flow. So the semi-open to me is bizarre. They just are what adoption agencies are trying to do is make people feel more comfortable because the word open makes people very uncomfortable. I think maybe we'll get to a better word for it so people can feel more comfortable, but it's part of why I speak at these type of things, right? Is so that adoptive parents know that it's okay. Like, it's okay if other people love your child. You know, like that's only positive. It and so many studies have shown that adoptees are much, much healthier mentally, emotionally, if they have that information and have, especially if you can foster a relationship. Yeah. And so within the relationship and the openness, there can be times you're busy or different things happen. You know, relationships can be strong, they can be weak, they can be different things. They can ebb and flow. But the major things for adoptive parents is, especially if you're thinking about adoption, because I know that's a lot of the folks that are listening to your podcast. Nothing. So I am here to comfort you. I am your future child at 44. I am an adoptee. I'm your future child at 44. And you're looking back, and here's what I'm going to say to you. Absolutely nothing can undo all of the love you have given this child. Nothing can undo that. Nothing can undo when they are sick, they want you to comfort them. They get an owie, you give them a kiss, you put a Band-Aid on it, all that stuff. Nothing can undo that. There's a foundation of love that is built between all the folks involved raising the adoptee, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing can change that. So when you add in birth family, it is not a competition. People cannot just have one family. It literally is, the more people there, the more people that love your child, the more your child just has general love. And the comparison I give that is easier for adoptive parents to kind of understand, because a lot of people have siblings or they know people that have siblings. There's never a time that people think when they see someone that has a child and they're about to have another child in the household, ooh, like nobody goes up to the parents and says, ooh, you're going to take away 50% of the love you give to that child and give it to the next. No, nobody does that. So that is exact. So adoptive parents, especially that grew up again outside of the adoption community, not knowing all of this information, I could see how there's a nervousness and like a jealousy. Sure. What if they like them better than me? They're their biological family. Mm-hmm. It is not like that. The more you close it off and are scared and nervous yourself, the more they're going to think they can't be themselves, the adoptees. You're hiding something. You're hiding something. And the more that you love their biological family, speak positively about them around them, encourage and foster that relationship, the happier the adoptee is going to be. So again, if you're ever in a boat where you're feeling jealous, nervous, concerned, right? Like, oh, I've wanted so bad to be a mom. I'm finally a mom. I don't want to share that. You're not sharing it. Mm-hmm. You're growing extra love for the child. And the part that a lot of hopeful adoptive parents don't realize, and I'd be curious, Rebecca, on your opinion on this, but it is actually very healing for adoptive parents to have that relationship with the birth mom. It's like we do not realize the benefit that's out there waiting for us, even like to see that love when they love your child and when they welcome you kind of into their family. It is a wonderful feeling as an adoptive parent as well.
I agree wholeheartedly. We all start at different comfort levels around that. And I'd imagine that every situation is so different, right? I got very fortunate. My son's family is amazing. I feel like they are a part of our family. Like there's no question about it. We have been embraced by their family. They've been embraced by our family, all of it. And it is beautiful. And there was a moment in time where my son's birth mother disappeared. I didn't know how to contact her and she wasn't contacting me. And I just felt horrible, not only for me, but for my son also. And one day out of the blue, after 2 years of no contact, she appeared again. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And I just felt like this relief. And she's never gone since. You know, she went through things, we went through things, all the, everything. But yeah, it is a beautiful thing. And I think that there is this sense of just peace with my son, knowing that they are part of our family. What I followed his lead, what he wants to call them, that's what I call them, whether I was comfortable or not with that at the beginning. That's just something that I knew was important to show him that I'm not threatened by your relationship. I am open to whatever you want and need. That's what I want and need too. And it's been a beautiful thing. Do you ever feel conflicted at all, given that you're both an adoptee and an adoptive parent? Are there ever times in your parenting when you feel that conflict? Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. Are there ever times in your parenting when you feel that conflict?
That is an excellent question. No, because everything is about making sure that she has the best life that she can have, and that she knows she is loved and valued and important in our family, important in her birth family. And both of those align to the same thing. And I, the different things that I thought of, when you first sent that question, because I loved it so much, was, I am fiercely protective of her. Well, that's from both of my sides, adoptive parent and being an adoptee, right? I want to make sure if someone says something offensive around her, I want to squash it, and I want to squash it in front of her. Or if I kind of flub it up, I'll tell her later, like, hey, I could have done that better, but those were from both of the sides. I mean, I don't, because it's all about her, and I just want her to grow up knowing that she's loved, knowing that I'm comfortable with everything, like I call her birth mom just mom. Like we don't go around and the only thing I have to specify is there is a very important close birth relative that she looks just like, by the way. We have the same named person on the other side of the family. So I do say like, birth in front of that one, just to clarify. But otherwise, we're, like we go around, I say like, honey, you have two moms. You should be very proud. You have two moms who gets two moms and a dad. That's pretty amazing. And so, and I'm like, we always talk about how many grandparents she has and all of that kind of stuff. So to me, I actually don't have any conflicts when it comes. If anything, it just makes me more and more focused on how to help her out and make sure that she feels loved and supported.
That's awesome. I just want to end with one more question. You said that your parents, I listened to another podcast you did. You said, my parents checked most, if not all, of the boxes of what adoptees want their parents to know. What are those boxes? And will you do anything different?
Excellent question. Yeah. So I read, I might butcher the exact title, but it's like 20 things you wish your adoptive parents had known, right? Yeah, and it's a quick read. Oh my gosh. I read it so fast. I was just, I don't know, very enthralling. And I read it and I thought, wow, for it being them getting little to no training, right? On how to handle an adoptive child, how to raise them, how to educate them, how to anything. There was none of those things. I felt like I needed to call them. Like I actually read the book and I called they're divorced. I called them each separately. And I thanked them. I was like, you guys did a really good job. Were they perfect parents? No. But when it came to adoption, my older brother is adopted. We're not biologically related. I answer it before anybody asks, because that's always the next question. They just didn't also do that back in the day. They did not keep siblings together, which is a shame. But yeah, I mean, we always talked about adoption. It was very open. We talked about it a lot. We're both closed adoptions because that's just what happened in the 70s. And if I was curious, they were curious, and they would tell me any information they knew, which wasn't much, right? We had like one piece of paper that both my brother and I were provided. And if she ever got things confused, like, oh, is that your brother's birth family or yours? She would just go whip out the papers and she'd be like, okay, this is what we know. about your family. This is what we know about your family. And then when I finally decided to search, she was completely supportive. She just kept asking how she could help. It just, all of that again goes to just really loving and supporting your children. And then, of course, when we were adopting, our family was over the moon. They were over the moon because they're like, oh my gosh, and so I knew I wouldn't have any problem like explaining things to my family, but I was wondering with my husband. So you had mentioned that he's adopted. He is what they call, I think, partially adopted. I think it's the term now that they call it. But his mom was a single mom, and the biological father was out of the picture. So when she was pregnant with him, she actually met his now father who adopted him. But it's important because his biological father was Asian, and he grew up in a white household. So he has a lot of similarities to how transracial adoptees feel. But I was curious with his family how they would be, and they were going out. Oh my gosh, the sweetest thing. They went out and they were like researching stuff, and they would bring me stuff. Is this okay to say? Is this not okay? This list conflicts with this list. Oh, it's the sweetest thing. And I think that's important to make sure, because these kids will be at aunt and uncle's house. They will be at cousin's house. And it is important that they understand adoption. It is important that they are not racist, right? If your child is going to be of a different ethnicity, like these things are very important, that they are just as involved. And in our case, they all had to write letters. Everyone had to prove they were accepting and excited about this, right? But in different, every home study is different. Our home study was intense. But that stuff is it's just very important to make sure that you're raising your child in a safe, loving environment where someone's not going to introduce them as, oh, and this is the adopted one. You know what I'm saying? Like it has to be normalized.
You're at a family
These are
barbecue.
our children.
Yeah. And that thing is
Exactly.
said to your child, and you're like,
okay,
really?
And well, and you know what? It's interesting that you say that, and I know we're at the last question.
No, that's okay.
But I think it's important as adoptive parents, a couple different things. One, have as many canned answers ready as you can. The biggest one being, like, for Lucky, I always have that one, because they're always like, oh, she's so lucky to have you. And I always turned around and I said, no, she's not lucky. We are lucky to have her. And I just turn that around. It doesn't matter. I can say it really fast. I can say it to the grocery store clerk, whatever.
Right.
But I think the biggest thing, because we always tell adoptive parents, talk about adoption, but then we don't tell them how to. And then, especially if you're a really caring, involved parent, or you're a hopeful adoptive parent, and you're like reading all these things, you're like, okay, I'm listening to adoptee voices, I'm listening to all these podcasts, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to do these things. And our positive adoption language changes over time, so it's like you're trying to catch up with making sure everything you're saying is accurate. Then there's like this immense pressure on you when you go to talk to your child. And what I want to do here, if you take nothing else away from this podcast, take this away. I want to take that pressure off of you. That if you say it wrong, that's okay, but say it. Don't wait to say it the perfect way. Start talking about it casually. Like, because when people say talk about it often, you're probably thinking, every day I need to say, you didn't come from my belly. It doesn't have to be like that. So here's just some examples. Our daughter has big, beautiful blue eyes. None of the rest of us have beautiful blue eyes. So we'll say things like, wow, your eyes are so beautiful. You look just like birth family member, blah, blah, blah. That's enough of an adoption conversation for that day. And then let's go with the bad stuff that we all fear. And it's always when you're ill prepared, right? So I always say it's like you're at the grocery store, you've got your kids in tow, you're trying to hustle through, you got like a kid birthday party to go to, whatever. And somebody says some comment, like the clerk says some comment to you, like either your child looks different than the rest of your family, or something's happening, something said about a birth family, like, oh, you're adopted. And then they say something inappropriate or unacceptable. And I don't know if you're like me. I'm terrible at comebacks. Terrible. I cannot think of things off the fly. I'm just like, oh, like just stone-faced. So let's say you do that. You're totally stone-faced, or you say something and you fumble, right? Just like, ugh, and you're just like, oh, that was not the right thing to say, and my child heard it, and like overanalyzing it, as parents do. Get in the car and say to your child, I really messed that up. I wish I had thought of something better to say. What should I have said? What would you have said? Whatever. That conversation's over. And if you're like me, 2 to 3 days later, the best comeback comes in your head. And you're like, oh, that's what I should have said. And then you know what? You pull your child aside. Remember when we were at the grocery store and that clerk said that crazy thing, blah, blah, blah. Here's what I wished I had said. And then parent, good for you. You had 3 adoption conversations. They saw you try to answer an adoption question to a stranger. You talk to them in the car, and then you talk to them about what you would have said. And that's 3 things. So what I want to say is take down your guard of perfection. The internet, with all of our comments and adoptees, we are absolutely trying to help by sharpening up the language. It's important to learn all of that, but it's more important to have many quantity over quality in these conversations, and you will get there. The more you have them, the more when there's the real big questions. So then if I didn't grow in your belly, what's going on? You can feel better prepared for that. So you're not just like deer in headlights, like, oh, it's here. This is the moment. I studied. I prepared. I don't know what to say. You know?
We tell all of our families, start on day 1 because you're going to fumble. You're going to say something out loud that sounded weird and you didn't like that. And by the time they have any clue of what you're saying, they'll know how they came to you and they'll know what their name is at the same time. And there won't be any, and you'll have practiced that, that language that you want to say. And you'll have to decide, is that a moment for education? Is that a moment for none of your business? Or is that a moment just to screw with them a little bit and have some fun, which I've done too. So you get to choose at any given moment. But yeah, I've often done that too. Hey, what'd you think of that comment? Did I say that okay? Or what would you have said? Such great information and things that you've taught us. A couple fast, rapid fire question. What drives you nuts?
What drives me nuts in general or around adoption?
In general.
Oh my gosh. In general, drives me nuts. I would say, like most people, probably like traffic, traffic drives me nuts, but just more like I want to get to where I'm going.
Awesome. Are you listening to a podcast or book right now that you really love?
Yes. Angela Tucker. You should be grateful.
You should feel grateful. Next to me. Yeah. Who in the adoption world has made such an impact on you? I want to shout them out.
There's a lot of different people. So I would say several of the folks at the adoption agency that we used, American Adoptions, Melanie and Shannon over there, they were amazing. And then I would say some of the big ones, Lori Holden, she wrote the book, Open-Minded, Open Adoption, and she was hosting a podcast for a very long time. She has wrapped it up now, Adoption the Long View, but it was one of my favorite listens every week. And then I would say Alina Hall, she wrote Adoption is Both. We do a lot of events together because we're both adoptees that wrote children's adoption books. She also works in the field of adoption as a social worker. And then obviously Angela Tucker is like the one, right? Because she helped out in This Is Us to make sure that they were fully guided to say the right things and represent adoption in the right way.
3 words that describe adoption to you.
Goodness. I would say complex, love, and loss.
Thank you so much, Allison. And
thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, go to Amazon, everybody. And is that the best place for people to find your books?
Amazon is a great place to find the books. If you want to visit my website, ouradoptionbooks.com, it has links straight out to the books. And then I also have 2 different blogs I've written. So I have read every children's adoption book. If I haven't, send me a direct mail and I'll read it. But I have a list of ones that I would recommend for adoptive parents. So I think that's a great resource. I also have a list of just adoptee written children's adoption books as well on there.
Awesome. We will put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much. And tune in next time for the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Bye-bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.